Ta-da! And we're back. Sorry about that. I did not set the privacy correctly, so it was on private. I recorded a couple private videos on accident in my time. But yes, let's get back into that. If I ask you the question, where did you learn? Do you understand the difference between emotional availability and emotional free time? Do you understand the difference between privacy and guarding? If I ask you the question, ask the question one more time. If I asked you the question, if someone were to ask me the question, the difference between emotional availability and emotional free time, the first thing that I would look at and say to them is, what is that? What is emotional free time? I thought availability and free time were terms of business, terms that you use within aspects of business, terms that you use within aspects of business or in the aspects of a company or you're doing work. Congratulations. If I ask you the difference between where did you learn to develop your free time? What basis did you learn to develop your free time? If I asked you what was the basis of you developing your free time, your emotional availability, your emotional intelligence, your becoming an asset, you moving out of being a liability. And then I told you that from the traumatic space, from survival, you developed this obsessive need for free time and giving out your free time versus your availability. Simple way to give you an example to build on. Your emotional availability is based on privacy. Your emotional availability is based on privacy. Privacy is based on the boundaries that you've created that form the levels of access to you. Use an example. The level of access to me, my privacy, the level of access to me, whether it's to book a session, to book a consultation, book a reading, book a session, to do any work with me one-on-one. That's within my emotional availability. That's the amount of energy I have allotted into a space based on what I've already created or built for myself. What I've created based on the understanding of myself. My emotional free time will be any time outside of my availability that is based on developing based on the excess. Your privacy is based on access. Your free time is based on excess. Your free time, your availability is based on access. Your free time is based on excess. That means what's left. That means at the end of the day, let's say I'll use the example. Between the hours of 11 and 6, I am available. Between hours of 11 and 6, 11 a.m. and 6 p.m., I am available. You can book a appointment with me at 9, 10, and I might move it to 11. My availability is between 11 and 6, maybe 7. If you book a consultation with me at 6:30, usually you can I can slide you to a 7 o'clock. Rarely, but that's based on the boundaries, based on access. It's based on the boundaries, based on access to me. My free time, my emotional free time, that is spent on developing developing and creating new spaces, new structures, new environments in that space. This is important because a lot of times you'll find yourself trying to chip away from your availability and put it into your free time. And other times you're trying to take things that are meant to be in aspects of your free time in your emotional availability. Why is this important? This is one of those semantics of when you're doing the emotional semantics of you doing your internal work, you're doing your healing, you're doing your work, you're doing your self-healing, you're doing your building, you're coming into this new space with yourself. That's why that's so important. The difference between emotional availability and emotional free time. Two different things. Why they're so important when doing your work. Emotional availability versus emotional free time. Your emotional free time is used based on research. Think about your emotional availability based on research and development. Anything that's based on research and development, it gets your free time. Anything that you've already created, anything that's based on you sustaining, anything that's based on your growth, anything that's based on furthering your growth, your personal primary growth, that's emotional availability. Why is this so important? Because let's go back. We're going to start with the ladder and work up to the higher because we're descending before we ascend. We're not going to, I'm a God, I'm going to go up here. I'm a goddess. You got to descend before you ascend. That's why this is so important. From your childhood, from how you were raised, from how we were raised, based in survival, based in the complex, a lot of the things that we did, it could be whether it was super traumatic experiences or you could have had the two-parent household or whatever it may be. Doesn't matter. I can guarantee that from that space, the way that you learned to develop, the way that you learned to develop your energy, the way that you learned to develop inside of your space, you didn't learn based on emotional availability. You learned based on emotional free time because everything, you became secondary. You were a secondary moniker. You were secondary in that space. Your emotional development, your emotional development, your emotional intelligence, these emotional aspects, these shits were secondary. What was primary was your survival. What was primary was our survival. So you developed in that space. Think about cartoons think about it like this. You woke up every morning and you went to school. You woke up every single morning and you went to school. You was up at 5, sometimes 6. If you were privileged enough, you had to go to school early for training, weight training, football. I had boxing when I was later on in life, aspects of that. So you were given this space. So 5 o'clock, wake up. 5 o'clock, I'm waking up, got to go work out. 5 o'clock, wake up, got to go do drills. 5 o'clock, wake up, go do these aspects. By the time you turn 18, got out of school, dropped out, whatever that space may be, the next thing that you developed was if you didn't go to college and you went straight to work, now you developed the sense of going to work. Now you were given a new sense of your free time or your availability was given to you based on you going to work. So now instead of you waking up at 5 o'clock going to go do drills, now you waking up at 5 o'clock to go catch the bus, walk, drive, get your ass to work. That was your system. That system overlaid over all of the trauma. That system overlaid, that emotional semantic laid over everything that you did. And you developed. You were developing. You were trying to develop yourself to better yourself in that space. It was only based on that emotion, that free time that you had. But since you were only used based on survival, Remember, one of the key things and the aspects of how things manifest into your space, all five senses got to be active. All five senses got to be active. All five got to be active. And whatever you define those as, that's how that shit became active inside of your space. Why is this important when we talk about the aspects of emotional availability? Emotional free time and emotional availability. My emotional availability, as an example, we're going to use this as an example. My emotional availability in the space that I've created, in my healing, in my work, in my deep, deep dives into the darkness, going back into my space, I developed the privacy in that space. Privacy is based on access, based on my boundaries. Your privacy is based on the access, based on your boundaries. That means whatever boundary I put in place, that sets the tone of access to how available I am. Build it all the way out. Use the example. I'm available between the hours of 11 and 6. It's like, I'll use it like this. For new clients, I'm available between 11 and 6. If you are an ongoing client, you can hit me up at 6. You hit me up at 6 p.m. Hit me up at 6 p.m. and we can get a 7 to 8 o'clock session going on. That's all based on the levels of availability. As I groom these, as I now create my boundaries are based on my emotional availability. That means how much energy I have to give into that space. As opposed to my emotional free time, that's used for development. Your emotional free time is based upon your development. What you're developing, what you want to learn, your wind down time, aspects of that nature. But because of the trauma, because of the experience, because of the survival narrative, because of how we were raised, a lot of us keep putting things that are meant to be in the emotional free time slot of developing. We try to put these aspects into the availability category. You try to put everything over here, and you're trying to provide from your availability. And then you burn it. You're burning out things that are meant to be developed first in your availability. So this is when we think about the aspects of privacy versus guarding. When we think about privacy versus guarding, privacy is the access to me based on my boundaries. Whatever boundaries I have set will give a level of access. When I'm in a state of guarding or in survival mode, I'm constantly in a need to protect myself from everything externally. And if I'm stuck inside of guarding myself, I have no time to develop anything. If I'm stuck inside of guarding, I have no time to develop. This is a lot of times where you reaching that burnout. You got to keep the house, got to keep the car, you got to keep the kids, you got to do all of these things. You're constantly in a state of guarding yourself. You're constantly in that state of guarding yourself. So I spend so much time on guarding myself that by the time something becomes available to me, I'm not used to it. By the time something becomes available to me, for me to grow, for me to expand, I ain't ready for it. I don't know what to do. I got to do. Here goes the key. I dropped the video on my TikTok, and I was talking about the aspects of mastery is detachment. I can't, as long as I haven't mastered it, it's going to keep coming up. I can't detach from it. From that space of seeking the emotional free time, trying to be somebody's free time, trying to gather up enough free time, even to how you go to sleep at night and you're trying to grab the last hours of the day. That's a response to something that's unresolved because you haven't learned how to create your space. All of this is at the root level of learning yourself. All of this is at the root level of us learning ourselves and doing this work. I can no longer say to myself, I don't have time to heal. I don't have time to do this, because what I'm automatically telling myself is, no, there's something I don't want to let go of. I don't want to define it. This becomes the honesty when I'm inside of that space. I'm like, I don't want her to be, But if I get rid of this, and think about how many times you said this shit out loud outside of your mouth. The moment that I get back to me, everybody gonna think that I'm a monster. The moment that I get back to me, motherfuckers gonna think I'm an asshole. Exactly. The moment that I start doing what I need to do or what I want to do, people gonna think that I'm an asshole, I'm a monster. Think about what you're telling your subconscious. Remember, your subconscious cuts off don't, won't, can't. It cuts all that off. Your subconscious automatically, trying to protect itself, cuts off the want. It cuts off you won't do, you can't do. It's too expensive. It's too much of this, too much of those things. It cuts it off. And all it takes in is forget. All it takes in is monster. All it takes in is that aspect. Is that you shut it off. You're shutting yourself off. So by the time you actually have the free time, you don't know what to do with it. By the time you have the availability or something's available to you, you don't know what to do with it. Because you don't have a boundary, because you have old boundaries that are in place or old barriers that are in place that stop you from getting to that point. I remember the first time reading my first occult book ever. Read my first occult book ever. I read my first occult book ever. And I felt like the need to sit there and read that shit page by page, read every single page, get it all in. I had to get it all in. Because I wasn't used to having an available free time. Because in my space, what I created in my space was an excessive need. Everything needed me to be a certain way. So my availability is going outside of myself. See how you switch that? As long as I'm staying in a guarded space, my guard and my emotional free time is what I give to myself. I'm giving my free time to myself. And I'm giving my availability to everything else. Until I go through the process of switching my availability to me first and going through the process of programming my availability to me first, I'll never raise my value. I'll never be able to assess my value. I'll never be able to learn my worth. I'll never be able to learn because I'm going to be switched into the mode of, I got to guard that. I can't give that up. I got to protect it at all costs. So now this is when we look at the development of protecting your energy. And the first thing that we see most times people talk about protecting their energy is staying away from things that trigger you. Staying away from things that trigger you. Staying away from the shit that's going to make you mad, that's going to make you feel some type of way. Stay away from it. That's not protecting your energy. That's avoiding your energy. That's only avoidance. That's avoidance. Because as long as that stays open on the table, it's like leaving an open container on the table. It's like leaving that open container of soda on the table and you wonder why that shit went flat. But you can't even remember, when did I leave that soda there sitting on the table? When did I do this? When did I do that? This is how you create the mental chatter. This is how you feed that mental chatter. Because you're not used to sitting in that emotional space. Last Monday, we talked about sitting in that emotional space. Giving yourself enough time. Giving yourself enough time to develop. This is why one of the main things that I tell all of my clients, and I break shit down to my clients all the fucking time, that you have to give yourself time to develop. You have to give yourself that time and that space to develop. As much space as you gave yourself to make yourself available to everybody, you got to give that shit equally to yourself. One of the earlier things that I was saying in a lot of the videos, in a lot of the lives, was the aspect of I had to learn how to create my space and not feel I needed to burn it out. As soon as I get it, I need to drop that shit on. As soon as I get it, I got to drop it and run that shit. I got to run the ball. As soon as I get the play, I got to run the play. I had to develop that. I had to redevelop that because so much of my build was based in war. I've told the story about me being in the conflict in 3 different realms at once. My whole earlier life was based at being at war with myself. I was in war. I was in war mode. I was in fight mode. I was in prove myself mode. I was in this fight mode. I was in the fight club. And I couldn't tell nobody about Fight Club. I was in that mode. So everything that I took in at first had to permeate through that. And I'm hard-headed as hell. I was hard-headed as fuck. So every time that I got the information, this is what a lot of times where we get stuck in when we're thinking about availability in the aspects of protecting our energy. You'll automatically go based off the infatuation. The infatuation or the impulse. That impact, the only thing that the infatuation and the impulse is showing you is how present you were not. I'm going to say that one more time. The impulse, the infatuation, that impulse, that infatuation, that feeling that rises up when you get something new is letting you know where you're present, where you weren't present at, so you can sit within that space. It's kind of like me being when I was little. It's kind of like me when I was little. I had an excessive need based on being the oldest, based on being the oldest child, based on being the oldest child. Then later on, around 12, I've told the story about the aspects of finding out real parent, the real pops and the other side of the family and things of that nature. I developed this need to orchestrate and control. I developed this need to orchestrate and control. It was fun for me. I was developing it from a survival narrative though. See, most of the things that you learn when you were little, they were positive aspects, but they didn't serve a purpose inside of that point because you didn't have the space to develop it. You didn't have that true free time to develop it. All of your stuff became based on availability. If I have time at the house, if I have time when I wake up in the morning, then I'm going to go do this. If I have time, then I'm going to do this. If I have time, then I'll do this. So you develop this narrow sense of availability to yourself. So your value, this is where your value's at. This is where your self-worth is at. This is where your emotional intelligence is at. All of that is in the aspects of your privacy. What you view as being private with yourself. That's where your vulnerability lies. And you're guarding everything, or you're trying to stay in this state of guarding yourself at all times, you're naturally going to put yourself in this space where you're not really there, but you know what the feeling should feel like, or you know what it might feel like. And then by the time you get to a certain point with yourself, you're like, well, my life could have been like this. One of my favorite things to tell myself every single morning when I wake up, if I have the feeling, hey, my life should have been like this by now. All I ask myself, I rarely say it now, but I said this a lot of times in the beginning, what have you been doing to develop that? What have you been doing to develop that? What have you been doing to develop that aspect of yourself? What works have you been doing to develop that new space? You can't create in the old space of self. You can't create in the old space of self. Everything in the old space of yourself was already created. You already mapped that out. That was all based on the traumatic experiences, your understandings of your trauma, your lack of understanding of the trauma. It was always based in a lack. So if I'm sitting in the aspects of my lack, trying to build in an aspect of lack, all I can receive is more lack. So my emotional availability becomes based on lack. So now my emotional free time, that's where I'm trying to build things in. I can't build in free time. I only can develop there. See, when you're stuck inside of this space, when I was stuck inside of that space of trying to build inside of my free time, it was always based on the lack of time that I had for myself in private. So naturally, I would be triggered to feel like, okay, I burnt myself out at work, so I'm going to burn myself out on this. I only have this much time to get all of this done. I have this much time to read this, and this much time to do this, and this much time to do this. Until I learned, then I had to learn and break that down. I had to understand where that root came from. My waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning was going to school. At the same time, me waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, even though indirectly, what I was doing directly was the effects of what I was doing, was the effects of what was happening indirectly inside of my space. And in the spaces where I was doing something directly, the indirect was the effects of my space. Instant cause is the cause and effect. Me waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, getting ready for school, was the directly was indirect of the effects of my pops getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and walking to work and developing inside of that space. Me getting home, me getting off the school bus and walking to the house and getting to the house, and the program of me doing my homework and not being able to go outside or couldn't go outside until if Pops came home, I had to come back in the house. All of these aspects were the indirect and the direct effects that taught me emotional free time. My free time came after I was done with the work. My free time came after I was done with the work. That means I'm not doing any more work. Cool, now I got free time. What can I squeeze into this free time? What can I build for me inside of free time? So basically, when I came into the aspects of working a regular job, when I was working that 9 to 5, inside of that space, this is when you look at certain people walking around, they don't have nothing, you're automatically triggered. You have nothing to do, I'm pulling my phone out. You have to find something to do. That's a trauma response. You have to find something to do. You have to find something to do. You have to validate your worth. You have to validate your worth. You have to validate your worth. Have to validate your worth. I was living inside of that cycle. So, of course, since I'm emotionally unavailable, when I didn't get what I felt like I needed, when I didn't get what I felt like I was wanting, when I didn't get what I desired, I'm automatically looking for somewhere else to go develop it. I'm now going to create another space. Now I'm going to go create that space. That space becomes the relationship. That space becomes the friendship. That space becomes the friendship, the relationship, the job, another space, something to keep me so I can keep staying in the aspect that I'm lacking something. So all I do is build. Now all we do is keep building on top of that lack. And now at the base of this lack, that's the original point. That's where this is where now what controls my privacy? What defines my privacy? What defines my privacy? What defines my boundaries? What defines my availability to others? My trauma. Now this is another way in how we develop and keep ourselves locked within that trauma loop. Because everything that I've done defined my trauma. My privacy was based on my trauma. My exposure, because it's not vulnerability, my exposure to somebody was based on my trauma, based on that service. So as long as I could provide that service, as long as I could do something in that space, as long as I could be available to them at any time that becking call, and I'm getting something from it, my availability was only based on what was around me. How does this structure into how you attract things? How does this structure into how you attract things? Remember, we said it last week. We talked about the aspects of what my mind is in alignment with is what my heart is going to attract. What my mind is in alignment with, my heart is going to attract at every time. So if my mind is in alignment with the rejection wound, as an example, use the rejection wound or trying to be accepted, that means I'm only going to attract people at the level of where I've accepted myself. Boredom is dangerous. Boredom is dangerous because that's when your mind is just sitting there. You're not actively doing anything. But also in that aspect, boredom is only, like, use this example. Boredom is only letting you know that you got to do some things. Yeah, motherfuckers out here like, nigga, I guess I'm going to go for a walk. Why? Because I was bored. I guess I'm going to watch TV. I guess because I was bored. So now you acknowledge the example. You acknowledge boredom. You acknowledge boredom. Now that's your free time. Boredom is in your free time. So basically, every time that you're not within your free time, you're not bored. So now availability is only based on what you do. I'm doing a bunch of things. I'm doing everything every single day. I'm doing all of this stuff. It's like if you try to go work out and you doing workouts out of boredom, you open up your subconscious. That's why you can get distracted so easily, because you acknowledge boredom as I was just doing it while I was bored. This is where we get into the aspects of going to the gym is too expensive. Doing this I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do that. I won't do this. I wish I had more time for this. That's that cycle. In order for me to be based in my avoidance or the rejection, whatever wound it is, I must give that formula to that aspect, whether it's rejection, boredom, guilt, the insecurity, that doubt that you'll never succeed. Those aspects, no matter what you're doing inside of that space, is going to be defined by boredom. But it's not really boredom. Boredom is the identity that you gave your insecurity. Boredom is the identity that you gave avoidance. Boredom is the identity that you gave that to seek stimulation. Boredom, keeping yourself in that state of, okay, when I'm not lazy, I'm not procrastinating. All of these are statements that are based on stimulation. I know I should have did this 3 days ago, but I didn't. I should have did this yesterday when I said I was going to do it. Think about a simple program. Think about how long it takes you to do something. This is another one of the keys that I give out to my mentors, my mentees, and my clients. Think about something that takes you a minute to do. Do it at that point in time. If it takes you a minute to take out the trash, something simple, because you're learning how to integrate this into the real, you're learning, and this is also into the aspects of the old matrix for yourself, the old matrix that you were connected to and everything. All of that is going to become the opposition. All of that's going to be basically the non-playable characters. The way that you fit, the character you created based on your father, the character that you created based on your mother, family members, those are non-playable characters. Your baby father, your baby mother, your ex-husband, your ex-wife, your old job, all of those are non-playable characters. They're a part of your quest that you can gain experience from, but because of the avoidance, because of the trauma, you didn't know how to integrate and use it. But this is what keeps us this is what keeps you in the state of that cycle of attracting the same thing over and over and over again. You haven't learned its benefits of it. You're sitting there saying, I hate my baby mother because of this. I hate my baby father because of this. I hate my ex because of this. I hate this person because of this. I hate every bitch that come into my life. I hate every nigga that come into my life because of this, this, and this. And you naming out all the negative aspects. But what did they show you? And then sleight of hand, magic, glamour, sleight of hand. You'll sit there and be like, they taught me never to trust niggas no more. They told me not to trust light-skinned niggas. They taught me not to trust this person. They taught me not to trust a big butt and a smile. They taught me how to trust not to do this, this, and this. They didn't teach you that. That's not what they taught you. And that's one of the biggest things. So everything you looking at, one of the biggest things that I had to learn was most of my relationships was because I was bored. And I didn't like to go places by myself. That was a simple surface level of some shit. Most of my relationships and friendships were based on me and boredom, my mind staying idle, and me not wanting to go places by myself. Me not wanting to look weird for going to a restaurant by myself. Me not wanting to look weird and that grew out, me not wanting to venture in the new spaces without taking everybody with me. But if you listen to anything that I say, and who you start with is not who you gonna end with. Who you start with is not who you gonna end with. And when they come, if when they come back around, this is when we get into the aspects of like, when old people come back into your life, they're supposed to test you to see where you at. That's true. But if I can sit here, example, I've been in my space of doing this work, of building myself, internal work, and now in the forefront of like doing aspects of this healing, being where I'm at now, for 15 plus years. 15 plus years. 15 plus years. My mother in this year, from January till now, from this year, after my pops transitioned, my mother, her healing process triggered. All I had to do was show up. All I had to do was show up. My brother came in town with my nieces and nephews. Me and my brother had the conversations with my nieces, my nephews, and his sons, like the conversations that we wished we had from our uncles when we came up. Totally different from the conversations that our uncles had. All I had to do was show up. All I had to do was show up. My sister last week just went through her triggering process to start her healing process. All I had to do was show up. When you're inside of the space with yourself and you've been doing your work and you have built your space and you have now created this new availability to you based on your boundaries, based on that, you're allowing your boundaries to set the tone of the access to your energy. You ain't got to guard it anymore. Yeah. In the aspects, I don't like the word serious. I like the aspect. My mindset is like, okay, cool. This has a purpose. I don't say serious. I say, okay, this relationship has a purpose. Every relationship has a purpose. I'm not thinking about serious, not serious, because that gives you a bias. Every relationship that you're going to go towards is going to have a purpose. Accept this purpose. When we use things like serious, how serious are we? Are we committing? And we externalize these narratives. A lot of times we put those into that space. It takes it based on ownership. We have to change that tone in our mind. Remember, guarding is based on ownership, obsessiveness, excessiveness, putting ourselves into that position to own up to a certain aspects of ourselves that we have not yet developed. So now we go back to the aspects. All three of them, mother, brother, sister, all now triggered into their healing process. All I had to do was be available. I'm there. The availability, instead of going through a bunch of doubts inside of my mind where at a point in time with myself where I felt like I wasn't available enough. I felt like I wasn't available. I felt like I wasn't approachable. I felt like I was going to be rejected. These aspects and thought processes inside of my mindset. When I'm going through those processes inside of my mind, all of those spaces I wasn't ready. I didn't develop in that space of free time. I didn't develop that space yet. That's why I wasn't available. That's why I couldn't do what I needed to do. The aspects of watching my mom and my dad argue, watching my uncles talk about young chicks and young loose girls and all of this shit. Me not being able to say nothing or not wanting to say anything. I had to go through the acknowledgement process and be like, yo, nigga, I wasn't available. What I know now wasn't available. This helped me. This aids you in the aspects of when you start going through that deeper part of the process and you looking at your mother and you looking at your moms, you looking at people, family, friends, exes, and all of this shit of that narrative. And now you start seeing why you keep attracting what you keep attracting. You got to think about why you keep attracting what you keep attracting. It's because of what your mind's in alignment with. If my mind's in alignment with doubt, i.e. insecurity, then I'm going to, of course, attract. I'm in alignment with that. So, of course, I'm going to attract things based on insecurity. If I have an aspect in my mind with the feminine presence, like for a long ass time, it was like, I remember for a long period of time with myself where when I was in that shit, when I was in this shit in the physical realm, I was out there, ecstasy pills and weed and cocaine. Ecstasy pills, weed and coke. I was out there in the streets. I was in it. The way that I validated what I was doing was being able to drop money off to my mother. But my mom needed to stay a victim of her circumstances so I could stay a victim of my circumstances. These are shrooms. Woo! Microdose shrooms. Let me read this real quick. It's kind of off now because the majority of people I talk to, I'm like, yo, you too serious. Your inner child screaming for relaxation and fun. But the program out here is sold for adults to be serious. Yeah. Because that triggers, but you have to look at it like this. That triggers your boredom. That triggers your boredom. I remember being in that space with myself all the fucking time. And I remember always trying to tell, like, yo, I didn't know for myself what being serious was. I didn't replace seriousness with purpose yet. I didn't transfer my energy from the being serious and being, because my seriousness was always based on being angry. My seriousness was anger for repressed memories. So as long as I could be serious here and show, serious face, ain't nobody, he looked serious. He looked like he got his hand in his pocket, so he looked like he mean. Y'all seen Get Rich or Die Trying when 50 Cent had his hand in his hoodie and everybody was pulling niggas out the way because the nigga had the gun on him? That's the type of shit that we develop. You develop these mannerisms for yourself in order to stay within inside of the space. But when you go 90 times, when you step outside of that space and you really look at the shit, it's like, look at your Facebook memories. Look at your Facebook memories. If you got Google Photos, at the top of your Google Photos, it shows a year from yesterday. And look back at what the fuck you was doing back then and why you was doing it. And if you're doing anything that's based on giving you the same feeling of what you were doing back then, you haven't grown. This is the most, oh my God, I really haven't grown. If you're doing anything based on, think about it like this. The level of access to me has changed. The level of access to me has changed from everything that I used to do, everything that I used to say, how I used to act, how I used to smell, feel, taste, all of that shit. All of these aspects and these senses have changed. All of these senses have been elevated in those areas. But a lot of times we get stuck. I'm going to go back. A lot of times we get stuck in the aspect of that area because we're not used to it. You're not used to mastering something. Mastery, remember, mastery is detachment. I will only repeat it as long as I have not mastered it. It's why you go back to school 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, because there's more there for you to go get. So until I get to that state of mastery with myself, I can't practice it. It's why you look at the aspects of when you look at college and you go for your associates, your bachelors, your masters, and your doctorate. Your doctrine in the aspects of the feedback, your doctrine is when you're actually able to practice it. Your doctrine is when you exalted that emotion to the highest point. So now I can practice inside of this space. And all that you're doing down here is based on practicing inside of this space. But if I get stuck in the associates of my trauma, or my family is my family is the K through 12. Family is K through 12. That's K through 12, 1 through 18. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 18. But what happened to the first 5 years? You're already offset. But when you come out of the space, you're already offset. You're naturally put into an offset position. First 5 years of emotional development weren't there. If you go to China, Sweden, what's another place? China, Sweden, some places in South America, the first 5 years of your life are going to be based on the mannerisms. The first 5 years of your life is based on how to be around people, how to respond, how to act, how to say yes, how to say no, things of that nature. It's a program, but it's still there. Don't believe me? Go back and watch the Bernie Mac show. Go back and watch the Bernie Mac show and look at Brianna. And when she was going to, I forgot the name of the damn school right now. When she was going to her date, when she was going to her preschool, they were teaching her how to interact with people. They made it funny. They put it in there like, yeah, she ain't learned shit. And you saw Bernie Mac going back and forth like, yo, she need to learn how to be scared and fear and all of these things. It was the battle of the old aspects of yourself versus the new aspects of yourself. You're now relearning and you're not conditioning your inner child. You're actually relearning your inner child. That's where the privacy comes from. You're no longer reconditioning your inner adolescence. You're no longer conditioning your adolescence. You're now relearning your adolescence. These are those processes. You have to go through the process of relearning these aspects. Because if I'm not relearning it, then what am I doing? All I'm going to do is seek new terms and conditions. Let me read that real quick. Right now, I see it as it's my job. I'm coming to a fork in the road where I'm going to have to choose. I've been holding out for fear, to be honest. Same thing happened last year. I chose the job of survival. And let me read that one. I noticed most people treat others who live a firsthand difference as a drug. Yep. That exactly. Both of those go together. Both of those go together. It's that same fear narrative that now you're going to treat, okay, this person is this and that person. You're still separating everybody. As long as I'm still separating everything and not seeing how these shits go together, that's when I talked about this earlier on in the lectures. If I'm sitting there, the real reason somebody can be upset, you put Jesus, Christianity, religion, you put your childhood behind that. You put your childhood behind religion. You put your adolescence behind your spirituality. So now that you become conscious, you become aware, you're understanding yourself, now you're treating that like your adolescence. Your hyper-adolescence, the hyper-vigilance. Everything's based in survival. Meanwhile, now you have something that you don't like. So now you keep everything biased because of what you don't like, what you do like. I don't like the way that was said to me. I don't like the way that was done. I don't like the way they did this. I don't like the way they did this. Didn't matter what they did, how they did it, when they did it, up, down, round, whatever it was. What was the intention? See the aspects of your availability? The aspects of your availability is going to be based on where you set your intentions. I cannot develop the affirmations and my intentions in the same space. My intentions are set within my availability to myself. If there's something that comes up that I don't like, the result of something I do not like, that's what I need to take into development next. That's my next course of action. Rather than me just saying exactly what the aspects of a program, me staying stuck in program mode, and I'm like, okay, cool. Now that I'm a god, I can't do this, this, and this anymore. Now I'm doing the separation. I went from living in separation to being the separation. Now that I've become the separation, now I'm in another stage of development. Now I have to bring myself to a whole space. I'm not at a whole space. I wasn't at a whole space. You see that all the time, and exactly with the aspects that are following the program of saying, yeah, we got to get, if I'm no longer in a space with myself where I'm going to say I need to save my people. I'm no longer in that space where I need to save my people. Everybody, that's where you get into the aspects of you chasing shit. Mm-hmm. You still chasing something. How can I be triggered? How am I still at a point with myself? I'm saying that saying that I'm team whatever, and I'm still triggered by Jesus. But if I already did because the information about Christ consciousness I have not truly implemented Christ consciousness down to the lowest aspect of myself. I haven't allowed that shit to settle in. I just keep saying Christ conscious, and everybody's a liar about it because I haven't developed that with myself yet. So anything that goes against it, it keeps me seeking free time. That's why you go through the aspects of I can't do all of this and I can't do all of that and I can't make this jump and I can't make, why can't you? That's why you got so many people out right now. That's why you have so many people that are inside of that space of, instead of you actually doing the aspects of doing the internal work, I don't care what you do. I don't care how you want to do it. I don't care which way you go. You rather take the long way, which goes back to what I was going to go into earlier. It's like, if you meet me at this point right here, we have this conversation. This is like when somebody says, you got to go within, or you got to understand the depths, but you can't explain that. I can explain that. I can it's not about explaining it and trying to make it all intellectualizing or romanticizing it. It's about me actually being able to sit there and give you an example. Here's the example. Funny how I did that. Here's the example. If I'm sitting inside of my space and you come to me and you knew me from 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and the last time that you had access to me was based on 5 years ago. You was a chick, we had sex, or there was the thoughts of us getting together or whatever. You was one of my homeboys, you was a friend or associate or whatever. I was out there in that life and you wanted something from me, whatever, I had it for you. I'm not access to that anymore. When I used to get triggered by somebody coming from 4 years ago, hollering at me, coming to talk to me, and getting triggered by them, it was only letting me know where I wasn't present. It was only letting me know where I wasn't present. I wasn't present back in 2000. Use an example. I wasn't present back in 2008 in a lot of shit. So anybody that comes to me based on 2022 that are still stuck in 2008, in reality, they're still stuck 4 years behind that at least. They're at least 4 years behind 2008. That's 2004, 2003, 2001. That's the high school years. They're still stuck back there. So, of course, anything that I'm doing now is distorted because they're in my then. They're in the perception of my then. They have not understood, they have not changed their perspective to even come to the point to even look at where I'm at now. They still have all of their guard up. They still have all of their guard up from back then. They still have all of the lesson imprints from back then. So, of course, everything that I'm going to do, the trigger identifies where you were not truly present in the aspects of that memory. It's simply when we start programming, when we're in the program of our subconscious, and you're sitting in your mind, it's like, if I was in a relationship for 5 years, the first year I was there, first 6 months I was there. Second 6 months, I was with it. The first 6 months of the relationship, I was there. After the first 6 months, I developed, or I've talked about this in aspects of grooming, I've groomed an identity suitable for that space. So I groomed an identity, I groomed the man for that space, for that relationship. So now I'm acting out this for the next 6 months. This is going to burn out because this is only condensed light based on the last 6 months of what I've done. This is going to burn out because it's off. Now it's off because remember, my cadence is already off. My cadence was off ever since I came through because it was already offset. So naturally, everything I'm doing in my life is already offset. So I have to base my entire life off of stimulation, off of the attraction, off of the stimulation, the attachment, the impulse. See how you just keep staying in that cycle? Now you built an entire cycle like that. So now when you're coming out of that cycle, you got to look at everything that you indirectly created. I had to look at my life at everything that I indirectly or directly created. I created a life based on servitude. I created a life based off stimulation. I.e. me, I sold X pills. I sold X. I sold cocaine. I sold stimulants. I sold uppers and downers. That was the life that I developed and created to maintain that space. In order for that identity to stay relevant, I had to keep pulling back from there. I couldn't pull from the current. So that means no matter what happened in the current, my timeline is already offset. When you think about the relationship that you was in for however many months and days, that shit's offset automatically because you're not in the now. Because everything they do trigger you. She lost weight, it triggered you. Your first girlfriend didn't weigh enough. Your second girlfriend weighed too much. Your first man couldn't do this. The second man couldn't do this. The first job didn't do this. The second job couldn't do this. You are caught in a constant state of seeking the impulse. You're caught in a constant state of seeking that wave and learning how to try to condition that wave to fit you in the identity. My whole life was based on trying to condense everything into the identity. So if the identity fell apart, then I fell apart. If the identity didn't have no worth, I didn't have any worth. Because it was easy to give that identity the negative. Because I didn't want the negative. I wanted to think positive. I wanted to think positive and think cleanly and think healthy and think only healthy thoughts. And we talked about that in aspects of I wasn't thinking constructively. My constructing of my space was only based on the limited availability and giving myself free time. When you look at it, it's kind of like when you look at the aspect of by the time you turn 65, hopefully you got enough money saved up so you can actually do what the fuck you want. That program, every program that's down here is a result of the feedback that it's already synthesized within you. So every time you get triggered by a program, the illusion of people, the illusion of these bitches wanting this type of nigga, the illusions of these men wanting these type of women, it's showing you where you're at and what you put your value in. It's showing you where you it's showing you the lack of character development that you have. It's showing you that you didn't have a personality. This is exactly why these niggas this is why motherfuckers avoid the work. Because it's more than just I'ma read this. I have to integrate this into my structure. I really have to do the work. Because this is the reality of that shit. Whatever you put into that space and the emotions that lie behind it, those shits got to stay active. That shit got to stay active. That means if you built your entire life off of fucking fear, anger, insecurity, being readily available to motherfuckers, and your whole sex game, your whole stroke and sex game was based off what your uncle told you when you was 6 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old. So you developed an entire character, identity around that. So without that, you don't know how to act inside of that space. The moment that you become spiritual, the moment that you become awakened, you trying to grab everything to keep the condition on. Yo, we supposed to be free and out here hitting all the chicks and all. Your uncle said that same shit to you when you was 12. Your uncle was talking about hitting all the damn chicks. Go look at your uncle now. My uncle right now is 62 years old. This nigga just had a baby 2 years ago. Still looking at these young ass girls and still using the same dialogue that he been using. Get him something to smoke, get him something to drink. Same dialogue. Same program. I remember the last time sitting beside this nigga and looking at him like, damn, that motherfucker is still 12. He's still 12 years old. But that's not for me to be like, nigga, that ain't for me to judge, build no shit on that aspect. Look at him like, ugh, nigga, you sick. That's obvious. Why? I have to be able to accept him inside of that space. Here's the key of accepting. I'm going to read that in a second. Here's the key of accepting everything inside of the space that it is in. Here is the key of accepting it in the space that it is in. You have to remember, as you develop your energy, I'm about to run through a gallon. As you develop your energy, as you develop your new space, as you now develop within, we're going to use some metaphysical terms, as long as you're creating in the 4D quantum realm, you got to remember the energy you took up there is where that shit plays plinko down here. So if my intentions was to control some shit, or to be a real nigga, or to be a bad bitch, or to be this, and that, and the third, I'm damn sure gonna do that shit in the higher aspects. That's where that energy is gonna fall down to. I have to be able to accept that if I do something in a space, in a month, like use an example. Fatherhood. My fucking first name is Papa fucking Lucifer. Lucifer is the feminine aspect. Papa is the masculine aspect. Mother, father, Samdi is the aspects of the child or the lineage of the child. I'm a father. I'm married to myself. So what would be next to come to me? So of course, from the highest level, divine alignments, divine partnerships, alignments, gravitate toward that level. In the lower realms of space, I now get to understand, like, wait, that's why all those chicks, that's why I was fucking with all those chicks when I was, because I got to take it out of boredom. This is the key. Got to take it out of boredom. I got to take it out of, I was traumatic. I was trying to build a family and all. I got to exalt that shit. That shit got to come, that shit's going to come up with you. It don't leave. I have to exalt it as in, okay, cool. I was always trying to be the father from this angle. I was always trying to be this and try to be this, and this. I got to exalt that, bring it to the next level. Let me read that real quick. Yes, and applying that part. That causes so many to take a step away. I know because I was doing it for a long time. Everything I was seeking was out of surviving. Even spirituality. Mine was out of, greetings. It's that, exactly, and as you said, it is the aspects of that instant gratification. I didn't build that yet. I had to, getting out of this mindset of everything should come to me the way it came to me before, none of that shit exists anymore. Why did you build that in the first place? I'm not looking at an instant gratification. You're not looking at it as instant gratification. This won't happen again. I make sure that until I understand that something as simple as the community. The community. Me saying that the mind is all and everything is mental, everything is feedback based on me, that goes into everything. Even the community aspect. Just like saying you are your ancestors. All of these aspects implemented to wait, I have to become the community first. So I have to understand my original community structure. My original community structure was instant gratification, work till you die, strong black women, strong black men, hide your emotions. That was my community. Why? Because my media, everything that I watched, everything that I listened to was based on that. My financial structure, which was only based on money, I had no true financial structure. It was just based on making money. So I had, as long as my emotions stayed within fear, I was unconscious of emotional intelligence being the byproduct of financial literacy. Switch around. Financial literacy being the byproduct of my emotional intelligence. My emotional intelligence, hell yeah, I could burn myself out and make a bunch of money. Hell yeah, I could burn myself out and make a bunch of money. That shit worked every single fucking time. Because I could stay angry. I could use my anger, use my resentment, use my trauma, use that to go make some money. I could get instant gratification on the money. My worth was validated by what I was able to do based on what pressure I put on my own shoulders. That's the foundation. So what was my health look like? Now my health followed into that too. So my health ensued in that. I'm not understanding my emotional intelligence. My health being a product, my health and how I hold my health is a byproduct of my emotional intelligence. This is where niggas got stuck in. I want to be vegan. I want to be plant-based. I want to be this. I want to be this because that's going to make me more. No. Until you understand what it is, you're only going to keep repeating the same shit. If I was eating hamburgers, fried chicken, if I wasn't eating in a healthy, conscious manner, and I was eating based on survival, before I became aware of myself, what do you think I'm going to do when I become aware of myself? I'm always going to create an excuse. The reality is I didn't learn how to create shit. I just know how to copy and paste. That shit is not ingrained. I haven't did that process. So now if I'm looking at health, I'm looking at finance, I'm looking at the laws that I attain to. If I don't understand that everything down here is in proper fucking balance anyway, no matter how chaotic it may seem, it is in balance. It's triggering my emotions of what laws that I live by. And I don't understand that the universe is mental. What would this shit look like once I lose my mind? Once I lose my false mind, what would it look like? They have motherfuckers out here. Y'all thought the transgender shit was hilarious? They got motherfuckers out here being trans disabled. Think about it. There's motherfuckers out here right now being trans disabled. They feel like they're not in the right, they feel like they ain't in the right body. They feel like their body's not suitable for work. They trans disabled now. What do you think's going to happen to the old environment? The old matrix? It's going to be a direct result of what you're doing. So I built my community. This is the community. This is the dread pillar. This is the Kabbalah. This is the Quillo. This is all of those aspects. But if I'm not properly integrating with the information, what do you think I'm going to keep creating? I'm not doing it to stay there. This is how we keep getting stuck in the aspects of free time. I can't treat at a point in time with your spiritual growth, your spiritual journey, you can't keep treating this in free time. Eventually, this becomes your new emotional availability. But if we're skipping the step between emotional availability and free time, this middle point, that's understanding the emotions themselves, this is where you see the community itself. Yeah, because everybody want to be stuck and they want to be saved. They don't want to be this. That's where they're stuck at. That's where they're stuck at. You're still trying to survive. You only believe. You only believe. Where do you go when you die? Nigga, every time I go to sleep, I know all the realms that I go to. So apparently, I need to be, if I'm going into these realms and they're in conflict, and I come back here and my life's in conflict, that means it's an aspect of myself being in conflict. If I go into my higher self, and I see something that I don't like, and I come back down here and I try to, oh yeah, that's what that is. Because I'm not doing the work up there. I only can create, and I only can create up here. Everything comes down here. So if you don't like what's happening down here, you got to get, this is why I always say you got to get comfortable with the shit not going to be looking right down here. Until you've brought yourself to that space. I can sit here right now, what time is it? It's 1:24. 1:24. Over the last 6 months has been the most rewarding aspects. And this 6 months is based off of 2 years ago. This 6 months is based off 2 years ago. The next 6 months going to be based off the 2 years before that come after that. When you're back in sync with yourself, when you're in sync, all you got to do is show up. Your availability, all you got to do is show up. You can accept where it's at. If somebody's guarded, they're inside of an old space of yourself. What do I need to learn here? What do I need to develop here? Because it keeps coming up in my day. I didn't see 17 posts. About, oh my God, this. It's a crisis. Why is that a part of my life? Why is that a part of my life? I don't see it. I use the simple example. There's a McDonald's up the street from me. I use this example all the time. There's a McDonald's up the street from me. The reason McDonald's doesn't trigger me is because there's no part of me that needs McDonald's. There's no emotional attachment to McDonald's for me. That feeling that McDonald's gave me at that point in time doesn't exist. What I saw in McDonald's, how I felt with McDonald's, even to the aspects when I was homeless and I used McDonald's as a safe refuge because it would be raining outside. None of those aspects exist. So McDonald's is still there. I just don't need it. McDonald's is still there. I just don't need it. That's the part of you now going through the aspects of the process. It's accepting it where it's at. Because as long as I'm not accepting it, my energy is going to focus there anyway. My energy is going to focus right to that point anyway. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. That's a limit, bro. But yeah, y'all know my shit. I'd really like you to be the fucking best. I wanted to drop that out right there, get this information going. Y'all stay tuned for the rest of the parts. Everything from consultations, sessions, setting up for that work. Hit the inbox. I wanted to stop through and give us the emotional availability versus the emotional free time. You develop inside of your free time to grow you develop inside of your free time to grow the aspects of your available space. You're going to notice that as you're working inside those spaces that are based on your old development, working in those spaces based on your old development, they're no longer going to serve you a purpose. They're no longer going to serve you a purpose. But yeah, I love you. We love us. Ashe.